Alright, so we have our database class created, which is basically a wrapper class, because we're going to create subclasses for topics, users, things like that, and then we'll use the database class as kind of a wrapper to do different kinds of interactions in those classes. But before we get into that, I want to create our template class because it's really important. When writing good PHP code, you want to separate your views or your displays or templates from your logic and libraries and decision making, things like that. You want to keep those two as separate as possible. It's not good practice to just kind of, I guess, generate HTML inside of a class or something like that. That's just, it's not very good practice at all. So that's what we're going to do. If we go into libraries, you should have your template class. Alright, so we're going to open that up. It should be blank right now. And to save time, I'm just going to paste it in. It's a relatively small class. Alright, so basically we're defining class template here. The path to the template will be represented by this variable or property, and then we'll have variables passed in for vars, which will be an array. And basically we want to be able to set a value or an array or something inside of our logic, inside of our, I guess, our controller or our main file, and then pass that on to the template. Alright, so that's what this array is going to do, is allow us to pass data to a template. Whether it's coming from a database or whether we define it inside of the controller or whatever. And then next we're going to have our constructor. Basically we're just going to assign our template. Alright, so whenever we create a new template class, we're going to add in the path to our template in the instantiation. Next we just have our magic methods, get and set. Alright, so basically set, it's going to be ran when we write data to inaccessible properties, which we have up here, and then get is utilized for reading data, reading the data from inaccessible properties. So this will allow us to pass in values to into our template. And then the last one is another magic method, which is toString, which basically lets us kind of treat an object as a string, and we can actually echo out our template. Alright, and we're going to use the extract method to get our template variables. And this OB start, basically we're just going to turn on output buffering and basically store it as an internal buffer, and then we're basically just going to include the template into our file. So we can just define, say we're in user.php, I'm sorry, we don't have user, topic.php. We'll be able to just include the topic template, alright, very easily. So that's really it. It's a pretty simple class, but I've used it a bunch of times, and it's really reliable and easy to use. So let's make sure we save that. Alright, so that's all we need to see of that. So now what I want to do is kind of just implement that template class, and we'll start with our index page. So in the root directory we'll want to open up index.php, and actually before we do that, we need to add a couple lines to our init, our initializer file, which is in the core directory. Okay, it's ini. This should actually be init. I'm going to rename this to init.php. Alright, so open that up, and let's see. And this is where we're going to create our autoloader for our classes, as well as any requires that we need. So the first thing I want to do is require our config file so that that is available to us. Alright, so we're going to just require once config /config.php. And then we'll create our simple autoloader. Alright, so function, actually this should say autoload classes. Function autoload, this is another PHP magic method. Alright, so we're going to pass in the class name and then just require once. Libraries slash and then the class name. Okay, class name, and then of course we want the .php. Alright, so basically what this is doing here is it's going to let us create any classes we want in our libraries, and as long as the file name matches the class name, alright, so database here is the name of the file and then database here is the name of the class. As long as we follow that convention, we don't have to require our classes. They'll automatically be required through this autoloader. Alright, so that's really important. You don't want a million requires or includes streaming down your page. This is just a much better solution. Alright, so let me just add a comment here. Alright, and I think that's all we need to do for now. Actually, let's include our helpers as well, because we'll need these here. So I'm just going to paste that in. Alright, so basically we're just requiring all of our helpers, system, format, and DB. And actually there's one other thing, I guess we'll just put it in now, for sessions. When you use sessions, you need to have sessions start on every page where you're using a session. So it's easiest just to keep this here so that we can use sessions in any file. Alright, so we'll save that, and that's all we need for our initialization. And then all we need to do is just include that one init file into all of our other files. So we'll say require that's in the core folder, and then init. Alright, so that should do it. Let's just make sure we don't have any errors. Alright, no errors. So now what I want to do is use our template class. Alright, so I'm going to open another PHP block. And what we're going to do is say get template and assign variables. Alright, so how we're going to use this is create a variable called template, and we're going to set it to new template. Alright, so this is instantiating the template object with the template class. And remember, I said that when we do this, we need to pass in the name of the template. Alright, which is in our case is going to be in the templates folder, and the one I want to pass in is going to be called frontpage.php. Alright, so that's all we have to do to include our template, which you can see if I go into the templates folder, we have right here, front page. So I'm going to open that, and I'm just going to type in this is the front page. Alright, save that. Of course, it can be HTML. That's why this is just HTML. It's not going to be PHP because I don't have a PHP block. Alright, so, and then all we need to do here is echo template. Alright, now we can do this because we use that toString magic method, which allows us to just output an object. Alright, so if we save this and go back to index, reload, we get this is the front page. Alright, so our index file is nice and clean. All we have here is an object, a template object, and then we output that object. Alright, so that's why I really like this template class, even though it's really simple. And not only can we do that, but like I said, we can pass in values. Alright, so to do that, all we need to do is, let's say, assign variables. So we can take that template object and let's say template, we'll say, I don't know, heading, just as an example. And in here, let's say this is the template heading. Alright, so now if I save this and we just remember this heading, go back to the template and we can actually output that. We can say PHP echo heading. Alright, so if we save that and we reload, we get this is the template heading. So you can see how easy it is to pass things from basically your controller. Alright, when I talk about these main files that we have, index, login, all these are basically controllers. Alright, we're basically going to fetch data from the library, which is kind of used like a model if you know anything about MVC frameworks, and then we can just pass in our results to the template and output them there easily, okay, with embedded PHP. So it's really easy to use. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is for our front page template, what we don't want to do is have to include the same thing in every template file. Alright, so for a front page, register, topic, we don't want to have the HTML head in every single template. So what we're going to do is use an included file, alright, for our header and footer, because we know that that's going to be on every page. Alright, so first let's open up our header. And actually, you know what, first thing, let's grab our HTML that we created for our home page and just paste that into this template. Alright, so I'm going to go to the HTML folder that we created. I'm going to open up index.html, copy that whole thing, paste it in front page, and save. And if we go to our front page, it's all our HTML, but we don't have our CSS linked, so let's do that. Basically, inside of our templates folder, we have a CSS folder. Alright, so that's where we want our CSS to go. So let me actually go to the htdocs, talking space, templates, CSS. Okay, and I'm just going to bring our CSS folders over. Alright, and what we want to do is just link those up in the head area. And as far as the path, I'm actually going to just paste this in. Alright, so what we're doing is we're using that base URI constant that we created in our config file. So this will link to our base URL. And then we're going into the templates folder and then into the CSS folder. So that will grab our CSS files. So now we have our entire layout. Alright, but it's all in the front page, and I don't want that. I want to have I want to be able to just add content to this block, alright, and then have the rest kind of included in the file. Alright, so I'm going to grab a bunch of content here. So I'm going to go from the top down to, let's see, you just got to figure out what's going to be on every page. And I'm going to go down to this HR. Alright, so this is going to be after the heading. Alright, and I'm going to cut that out and then paste it in header and save it, and then go back to front page. And now I want to grab from the footer, and I'm even going to grab the sidebar content and put that in the footer as well. So I'm going to go up to, let's see, I want this one. Yeah, I'm going to go three ending divs above the 4-column div and cut that out. Okay, and I'm going to put that into my footer file. Alright, and then what I'm going to do, because if we save this now and reload, you can see all we have is the main area content. So we just got to include the header and the footer file in our front page file. Alright, so let's just we want to include includes slash header. Okay, and then we'll copy that and go down here and include the footer. Alright, so now if we go back, undefined constant includes. What did I do wrong? Oh, we need our quotes. Alright, that should do it. Alright, so now you can see we now have our header and footer, and we can use that in every single template, and all we have to do is you add these 2 lines including the files. So I'm going to stop this video here, and what we're going to do in the next video is basically do this for the rest of our pages. Alright, we're basically just going to have all of our static HTML inside of these template files, and then after that we'll do our logic, and then we'll replace the static HTML with dynamic PHP, which will pull all the data from the database.